11 years. That's how long I have been playing Path of Exile. And I never owned a Headhunter or Mageblood and never did a build with that. So now that Headhunter price dropped below 60 divines, I decided to buy it and give it a try. But it's not really built for like completely Headhunter. It just slapped onto the build to kind of maximize the clear speed and the damage potential. But the build is using Lightning Strike of Arcing, the one that only releases one projectile, but it has multiple chains. You can still gain extra projectiles, and then you essentially spit out multiple projectiles, and all of them can chain multiple times. So the idea was, and I wasn't really sure if I want to be doing this, but someone convinced me that if you use Tornado, then it somehow chains. And I have 100% chain of terrain, so it can kind of bounce off wall, come back, but it won't do damage because it still has to abide by the anti-shotgunning rules. Only one projectile can hit the same target once, unless it's like a barrage. You know how barrage works, just in a sequence. If it's not in a sequence, only one projectile can hit the same target. However, it can still, it seems to, or at least I was told that it can still hit without doing damage, then bounce back to wall, bounce back into enemy, keep hitting and ramping, because Lightning Strike of Arcing has 10% more damage for each time this skill has chained, and I currently have 14 chains. So the idea was to ramp up chains. The projectiles should kind of ramp up the damage and then hit the Tornado, and I guess Tornado is supposed to get a lot of damage, but nothing like that really happened in the end. It was kind of meh. It was actually very nice for clearing. It's so kind of satisfying to see those Lightning Strike projectiles just bounce off terrain and straight into enemies and just keep continuing for multiple screens. So for clear speed it's actually really nice for like Legion farming or Abyss. Abyss is a bit more annoying because it creates like a hole in the ground. Like Lightning Strike travels on the ground, so if there's an obstacle it just disappears. It's not like Arc, it's not like projectiles that fly through the air. So that's one drawback of Lightning Strike. It travels on the ground and obstacles can just completely negate your damage. So I'm not gonna go into like too many details about this build. It was kind of okay, but the main idea, like I said, was to use multiple projectiles that you get from Deadeye and from the extra one projectile from the passive tree, which is a bit awkward because you don't want to have even amount of projectiles, because if you aim directly at the enemy, you're gonna have like two projectiles to the side of the enemy, and they all both gonna miss. So you kind of have to aim a bit to the side of the enemy, which is a bit awkward as well. So yeah, getting more chains, getting chain of terrain charms, and then the Deadeye has 30% chance. So I have 100% chance to chain of terrain, but there needs to be an enemy nearby. I also have chaining range. I have sniper's mark for more projectiles to overload the screen, but like it doesn't really add that much more damage. Also, annoying part is that if you hit with melee, if you stand too close, you're gonna hit with melee, and that melee damage pretty much doesn't have damage compared to the projectile. Although a returning projectile, if it bounces off wall, only one of them is gonna still be able to hit the target and do damage. Quality on Lightning Strike of Arcing also adds extra chains, so I just chucked in ashes. I did try to see the damage with the Gloomfang, and I am using gloves Abhorrent Interrogation. Your hits cannot penetrate or ignore elemental resistances. However, I am combining this with Rakiata's Dance, because Rakiata's Dance does not ignore resistance and it does not penetrate. It just flips enemy resistance from positive to negative, or from negative into positive if you somehow mess up the build. So it should work pretty well, but I have to apply like 15 withers in 2 seconds at like 22% chance to apply it on hit. So I think that part is not really working very well, because I don't think that returning projectiles when they bounce off wall hit the enemy actually. I think it just passes through without hitting. So I don't think that I can ramp up 15 wither stacks on enemy with this, and probably that's why the damage feels bad. Although looking at POB, if I don't have withers, I mean it does not feel like 8 million DPS even. So like that's the tricky part. Like in POB, like it's 10 million DPS, but that's after 14 chains, and there are two things that scale with chain. Projectile Mastery. Projectiles deal 20% increased damage with hits and ailments for each time they have chained. So each time like they bounce off wall or of the enemy or of tornado, it should gain an extra 20% increased damage. And obviously from Lightning Strike itself you get extra 10% more damage per chain. So with Gloomfang, you don't scale Gloomfang per chain, it just Once it chains, it gets extra non-heals as extra heals damage. It also gets extra chain, extra projectile speed, but also like I need more attributes, so I couldn't really swap it to test it out. I don't have the final charm. I also am level 93. I would need like this one. I've been trying to see if like point blank helps or not, and it does seem to work better than without it. Do large cluster jewels. Not really. There's no like specific reason. And yeah, like Ralakesh Impatience, so we always have frenzy, endurance, and power charges. That's better for crit chance, and the crit chance is actually not too bad, like 77%, but that's with bottle fate, 65 without it. There are many things that kind of inflate the damage, like with the stacks, the amount of projectile, the amount of chain. So as soon as I lower that, I lower also the shock effect, let's say 15%, maybe 2 million DPS, and it feels like that most of the time. I don't know, maybe I'm lacking projectile speed. If someone knows, did I did something wrong? Is there some kind of mechanic where you can benefit from like multiple chains like that? Chaining of terrain and then of tornado. How exactly is that supposed to work? Because for me, no matter what I tried, it just did not work. Like I start to like ramp up the damage, the projectile starts returning, then I drop the tornado. And like I noticed the damage gets a bit higher because obviously tornado absorbs the damage and does that damage to enemies later. But it's hard to tell how much damage it's doing. Actually, it's pretty cool when it's moving this quickly because of ashes giving extra movement speed for tornado. Yeah, it's getting 110% increased movement speed with the ashes. So it does have some arm up time, and after that, during arm up time, it does not even target enemies, so it's kind of annoying when you release tornado and the enemy is like standing next to you and it just goes away. Then it has to come back to enemy, and by the time the enemy may be in a different spot, so it just feels clunky and not really very fun to play. The fun part is seeing the projectiles bounce off walls and clear out all the enemies, but other than that, it's kind of eh. And I think I'm gonna sell Headhunter because I just don't see the appeal of it. I tried it. Sure, you get buffs sometimes, from time to time, they benefit you, sometimes they don't really add much. I probably could swap the build and I probably wouldn't really notice the big difference. Of course, you notice once you steal Soul Eater, but in that case, I think it's much more interesting to do a Soul Eater build with the Soul First belt, because that you can build around and it's consistent. You know what you get. You put it on, you know what you're gonna get. With this, you just get random stuff, and you still need to be strong enough to kill rares to get those buffs. So, I don't know. I think I'll never use Headhunter again. This is my first time owning my own Headhunter, and probably the last time. Unless I still have not found it. The game did not drop Headhunter for me ever in those 11 years. This is the first time I just had the currency to buy it. I even have the currency to buy Mage Blood, but that one I think I'll never do. Maybe if I come up with some like very niche build that just for fun to add Mage Blood, because Mage Blood I believe is now below 100 divines. So that's it for this build. I'm gonna be doing some niche build next. Here are the items. You can kind of guess what I'm gonna be doing here. You can tell just by one item. You see this item, you can already know what I'm gonna be doing. So yeah, it may not be great. I may actually rework into Flamewood. I did Flamewood. Flamewood is like really high damage depending how you build, but it's my backup plan. So for now, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.